The bugs are just so special. There's nothing else like them, and when you see them for the first time, you know that this is an opportunity that very few people in the world get to interact with a landscape that's this spectacular.
I mean, when you go out to the Alpine, you can have moments where you're all alone with nature.
I went to Barnes & Noble back when bookstores were a thing, and I looked in the sports section and I found a book on rock climbing called Mountaineering: Freedom of the Hills, and on the cover of that book was a photo of the traverse between the north and south summit on Bugaboo Spire. And I sat there in that bookstore and thought, this place cannot be real, but I'm gonna find out.
Going to the Bugaboos, it's a truly alpine climbing experience. When you look at Bugaboo Spire and you look at the northeast ridge and the summit traverse and then the descent down the cane route, you realize that this is going to be a long day. There's, no shortcuts to it. Once you're on the northeast ridge, you are committed to finishing the route.
It's 2:30 a.m.
Yeah.
Martin wakes me up and says, let's go climbing. This is becoming a common occurrence now.
I like to think that diabetes is not a limiting factor of what I can do, but it is a factor in the way that I do things. I'm always hyper aware of what's going on with my blood sugar based on the margin of error I have if something goes wrong.
Any lapse of thought, caused by having a low, you're putting yourself and your partner at risk, and those risks can be deadly. We were the first people, I think, out of camp. We saw a few other people still finishing their breakfast. I did take a wrong turn at one point and we lost maybe 20 minutes doing that, and then turned back, found the correct route, and in the meantime a few parties had passed us.
We put so much time into getting there. We got up at 2:30 in the morning. We were the first ones out of camp. We did everything right. I ate, a sizable breakfast, and yet, despite doing everything right, you still have this mistake, this error that is going to cost your partner and you a position on the climb. It's going to cost time, and time is safety.
I mean, I could really empathize because, I've had low blood sugars in the past, and they can hit you really hard.
When my blood sugar went low, it was like a bad omen. This is not the foot that I want to start off a huge, challenging route on. We're already kind of behind the 8 ball. Parties are passing us. We're starting late, and it just rattled me psychologically.
I think, I made some optimistic assessments that, okay, sunset is at 10 o'clock tonight, so we've got so and so many hours to finish the East Ridge, and then maybe 2.5 hours to do the summit traverse. And that'll leave us with 3 hours to do the descent. And that kind of seemed reasonable. This was our first time on the route, and this is typical on alpine routes. Sometimes route finding can be a little tricky.
To me, spending the night was something that I was not comfortable doing. I didn't feel like I was prepared for it. And I think a lot of that, in hindsight, was just psychological. It's fear, because that wasn't part of the plan.
Before we knew it, we were almost at the south summit, but the sun was on the horizon, and darkness was setting in. Off in the distance, we did see a thunderstorm passing through. If it stays in the distance, fine, but if winds change and it comes our way, we're on the second highest peak in the Bugaboos, 50 meters below the south summit, and that's not exactly the ideal position to be in when a thunderstorm comes your way.
So this is an unplanned bivouac. It's kind of interesting. This is my first time ever experiencing such a thing. I've always wondered what it's like. I've always been kind of scared of it.
The bivvy was this little ledge that was barely enough room for you to sit on. And down below it dropped off in a series of additional ledges, and all of these ledges and everything was covered with lichen and loose rocks. So if you sat really still, it was okay, but it was kind of the place that you wouldn't want to be moving around in the dark.
In the morning, assuming that the weather holds, we'll be able to make an early start and get back down the mountain. Let's hope that lightning stays away.
And it started with just like a couple of drops. I hear Martin say, uh-oh, and the wind just kicks up. I can't really move, my legs are kind of asleep. I'm watching Martin, he's all business, grabs our bivvy bag, he goes under this little cave, this little rock slab that was next to us. He puts the tarp down, gust of wind comes straight down the tunnel.
And you could see them like above the slab, which goes down 500, 600 meters to the Bivouac Glacier. You just saw them hovering into the air, and then they swoop down into the darkness. That was like a oh crap moment.
I heard Martin say, oh crap.
The bivouac is what was keeping us warm that night.
And that was when I knew, it was like, this is it.
I think we were both kind of speechless. we were just kind of deep in some sober thoughts about how we're gonna spend the next few hours.
And like, he doesn't say anything to me, and then all of a sudden he comes leaping out of the cave into the darkness. I'm trying to follow him with my headlamp. He goes out of sight, and I'm thinking to myself, that's it, he's lost it.
I just had my eyes trained on that bivvy bag. Jumped to the first ledge, ran down the slabs to the second ledge. The bivvy bag was still there.
I see him climbing back up through the darkness, rain blowing all over the place, and he's got the tarp.
The rain and the gusts of wind disappeared. Like 10 minutes later, it was calm air again.
And so the remainder of the night, there was still worrying about blood sugar, there was still worrying about the cold, there was still the cramping legs, there was still the discomfort, but there was the thought that, you know what, we can do this. So the next morning, when we came back up over the ridge to get on the first rappel and actually start the descent, the wind just like boom, it was just like icy blast, just 40 miles an hour, just solid, just pummeling. And it was like, okay, we're awake now. And the last thing you want to do when you're in a critical descent like that, and especially when you're operating on no sleep for over 24 hours, you have blood sugar concerns and you're trying to keep that intact, and you have all of these things, just such an incredibly high stress environment. The last thing you want is something making you rush, something making you fumble.
36 hours on the go, no sleep. I had a couple handfuls of Brazil nuts, a couple pieces of cheese, a little bit of jerky, and climbed all of that and down. Sorry, I can't hold the camera straight. I was remarking to Martin earlier that it's incredible how much our bodies can do on such small amounts of fuel, when you have to.
Was it worth going up the northeast ridge and getting benighted? Absolutely. It depends how you look at the situation, right? Is this the glass half full or is it half empty, right?
I struggle. It is not graceful. It is hard, and it is challenging, and it is scary, and it makes me question my life choices and my decisions. I wouldn't have opted to, have a low blood sugar, get behind on the route, spend the night, deal with chaos and thinking that Martin hucked himself off the edge of the cliff in despair after a bivy bag. These aren't things that I would choose. But at the same time, when you look at the net result, I have a different story in my head now when I go climbing. I'm not limited to say, if this happens, then I'm done for.
We had like some spectacular scenes, which we would have missed if we had gone down in the dark the night before. So, sometimes trips, they unravel in ways that you hadn't expected, but they also bring some new surprises and new sights that you wouldn't have expected before. Some good adventure to be had out of that. That's my thought. We had a chance to also, for the first time, really get close and cuddle. I mean, we were staying warm, right?
Have you not used a lighter before, Martin?
I barely used lighters.
Alright, so the spark is good. Let's get the fire, let's get the gas going. Alright, you do the gas, I'll do the light. Ready?